Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Shall we get started? So good evening, members. Good evening, officers of the council, and good evening, our one member of the public who has kindly come along. Welcome to this extraordinary meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. So in terms of housekeeping, for fire evacuation, if the fire alarm is activated, we'll vacate the offices via the stairs. We're not using the lifts, and assemble in Hawley Square as usual on the green, and officers will assist and advise when deemed safe to return to the chamber. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? No? Perfect. And if... Well, no filming, so that's fine. And can everyone please make sure their phones are turned to silent? And that they're not used to make or receive calls in the chamber while the meeting's in progress. And this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public, and it'll be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the council's YouTube channel. I don't believe there are any councillors who wish to speak under 20.1, is that right? No. No, perfect, thank you. And our apologies for absence. We've got Councillor Will Scobie, who's being subbed for by Councillor Harry Scobie. We've got Councillor Yates and Councillor Scott. Any other apologies? And any declarations of interest? Fantastic. So first thing is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of October 2025. That's in the agenda pack. If you try, and I noticed if you try and actually just click on it from the council notes, it comes up as you can't get into it, but it is available in the whole pack. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at that. May I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Britcher. And may I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. And do we all agree? No. Agreed. Okay, so next agenda item, we've got the Grant Thornton Audit Findings Report. I've got Chris, Darren or AJ here to speak about it. Okay.
Thank you, councillors. So item 4 is the Audit Findings Report from our external auditors. We've got Darren and AJ here with us tonight, and the report covers the financial year ending 31st of March 2025. As the committee will be aware from the report, the national context for local audit remains exceptionally challenging due to the statutory backstop dates introduced by the government to clear the national audit backlog and the resulting lack of assurance on opening balances for previous years. The auditors intend to issue a disclaimed audit opinion for 24-25. I'll be honest, the headline of a disclaimer of opinion sounds pretty scary. But the way I try to think of it, it's a bit like a structural survey on the house where the previous owners lost all the paperwork for the foundations. Doesn't mean the foundations aren't solid, they just don't have the paperwork there to assess it against. So because of the national audit backlog, the government has basically hit a reset button since the auditors can't fully verify that the foundations or our opening balances from previous years, so therefore they can't give us that traditional clean bill of health that we get for the whole financial year. It doesn't mean the whole house is falling down or that we found errors in this year's spending. It's effectively a technical result of this national reset. The reports also include commentary on our value for money arrangements. While noting progress in some areas, the auditors have also identified significant weaknesses, particularly relating to our medium-term financial sustainability, and those are things that I've talked frequently, member briefings, at around overview and scrutiny, and at Cabinet around that, and obviously the knock-on depletion of our reserves. And that very much aligns with the internal assessments that we've made and into the budget that you'll all be seeing at next week's council meeting. I'll now hand over to our representatives from Grant Thornton to present their detailed findings.
Thank you very much. With your agreement, Chair, given that both reports are under the same agenda item, AJ will say a few words on the first report, the Audit Findings Report. I'll say a few words around the Value for Money report, and then we're happy to answer any questions that members may have.
That sounds perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Darren. And thanks, Chris, for the introduction. As members would be aware that because we don't have assurance over the opening balances, the opinion for the year is going to be a disclaimer of audit opinion. However, having said that, in agreement with the management, our focus for the year has been on in-year transactions and closing balances. That means that we've done work on all the I&E, which is all the income received for the year, and all the expenditures, so all the capital spend, including capital spend as well. And we've also done work on significant risks identified, which we brought to you in the previous committees around management override and controls, investment properties, and significant other land and buildings. We've finished all the work that was required to do over in-year transactions. The findings are in the audit findings report. There, on the headline pages, we've identified a few weaknesses, specifically around the IT environment. So as you're aware, the council has gone through a system change and a new system implementation has been done. So we carried out work around system migration. During that work, we have not identified any significant issues. However, we have identified some findings around controls, which we have reported to the management and have recommended and have given recommendations. Management has responded to this and have a plan to sort them out for next year. We've also identified some weakness around privileged users access, which is part of the work we have to do over journals. We've also given recommendations to management and have now received responses. So there is a plan in place to get rid of them. Hopefully they go away next year. We've done some work on journals. We've not found any issues with journal postings at transaction level work that we've done. However, over other land and buildings, we did find a few properties where, because of the time constraints, we were not able to get full assurance over 4 properties, and also we were not able to get assurance over 1 investment properties, which is non-material. We flagged that in our report. This is not to say that those are completely wrong, but this is an issue with the backstop and the time constraint that we were not able to get the work done. Other than that, we don't have any other significant findings in relation to the audit findings report. We finished all the work on in-year income and expenditure, where we have not found any significant issues and have not reported them. That would be all. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, AJ. And to the value for money report, so just to remind you what we're required to do, it's to give an assessment of your arrangements to ensure financial sustainability, good governance, and the efficient, effective and economic use of the resources that are available to you. The National Audit Office defines what it means by value for money, and then we assess those arrangements, your arrangements, against that scope by the NAO. Where we're required to give a balanced commentary where we think your arrangements are appropriate, but also highlight where we think they may be deficient. We make a judgment about the importance of any weaknesses that we find, and those that we consider to be of a degree of importance, we badge as a significant weakness. And wherever we identify a significant weakness, we make a key recommendation. We think we identified significant weaknesses across each of those 3 themes, and we set the reasons for that in the report. The significant weakness for governance and for the 3 E's, I think you'll be familiar with, because they continue forward from last year. Where appropriate, we do highlight any change or progress against those recommendations from last year. In respect of financial sustainability, we raised that for the first time this year, and that was very much recognizing the position that we knew it to be back in October, November, or based on your then medium-term financial position, in recognition of the quite a significant overspend in 24-25, a forecast overspend for 25-26, and the rate of usage of your reserves to meet those overspends, and recognizing that you're not blessed with very healthy reserves, and therefore it painted quite a challenging position for the medium term. And at the time, the medium term gap was just under 9 million, and your reserves were such that they wouldn't meet that gap, or they would meet it but be virtually extinguished. So that's the context in which we reported our concerns around financial sustainability to you. We do acknowledge that the position has moved on somewhat. You've had the outcome of the settlement. The medium-term financial plan has been reassessed. You have a balanced budget on the table to be agreed later this month. And we will refresh our assessment around financial sustainability as part of our 25-26 work. Happy to take any questions you may have on both reports.
So do members have any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Packman.
Yeah, thanks to everyone for the reports. Just around financial sustainability, what assumptions underpin the revised 1.5 million to £2 million structural deficit forecast? I'll leave that as the first question.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Councillor Packman. So, as Darren rightly said, the position has moved on, but the message is still very much the same. So, the budget is balanced for next year in 26-27. We've had the settlement through, which is a multi-year settlement, and I think it's fair to say that districts in particular haven't done particularly well in the settlement. Not so much for 26-27, but for 27-28 onwards. To give you a flavour of that, so we get the provisional settlement just before Christmas, and the government says this is what your funding is going to look like, and then they finalise it after Christmas. And we got that a couple of weeks ago. For 27-28, so not next year, the year afterwards, our funding's reduced by 700,000 for that year. So there was already a gap for that point when we talked about the draft budget. Draft budget gap is about 600,000. Simon and I, when we're looking at these types of things, to be honest, with you 600,000 is pretty much usually the order of magnitude you start with a normal budget setting process without being incredibly worried. At a district our size, we'll find ways of dealing with that. It's up to 1.1 million, and that's not an easy gap to close. Honestly, work will have to be done. We know what the funding is, and that's going to be a challenge, to be honest with you, to actually balance the budget. What I've said throughout all my budget reports and my briefings, so if you look at the later years, and as you see, the medium-term financial plan that's going to go to council by the last year of a medium-term financial plan is £2.5 million. That's a lot to be taken out of our budget. The reality that we're dealing with at the moment is if local government reorganisation goes to schedule, then we've only got 1 year to deal with after this current year. And if we can control the budget overspends that we've had this financial year, and we put a lot of money into next year's budget to address that, we should be able to contain that within the reserves. I'm not saying we won't be taking money from reserves, that's because there's always risks in delivery of any budget, but 6 million should see us through that next 2 year time frame. If LGR is delayed, and we've seen what's happened recently with the change in decision around local government elections, if there's a change to the timetable, that then becomes a real risk to us that we could potentially run out of money when we get to 28, 29 or 29, 30. And I've set this out in the budget. If we're in that situation, we'll be looking at some sort of either discussing with MHCLG around potentially capitalisation directions or exceptional financial report, or otherwise substantial savings programmes. And I note the comment that Darren made in his audit findings report and the value for money assessment that we don't have a detailed savings programme, but that was actually a conscious decision that we took as a management team because of the context of local government reorganisation. If you start hacking away at services just before you transform an organisation, you will have significant staff flight. We will then end up having to recruit expensive interims because no one will join the organisation that's only got less than a 2 year lifespan, and it will be counterproductive. So we've looked very much to try and maintain and suppress service overspends and contain that within the existing sort of budget and service expenditure sort of arrangements we've got, rather than looking at a savings programme. But I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself here. The big risk that we've got is time. we can manage this. I'm comfortable. We can manage this over the next 2 years. If there's a delay, we're going to have to do something different.
Do you have a further question?
So I would rather we planned that LGR wasn't even happening, if I'm being honest, because it's like a nice to have in our situation. If LGR happens, it's great, pressure's off. But I'd rather us be planning that LGR doesn't happen in 2028 and we're here till 2030, 2035, whatever it is, because we've seen it in the last week. A week in politics is a long time, let alone 2 years in politics is a long time, and we all can probably testify to that as politicians. It leads me into the next question then. Do we have enough reserves for the level of risk we face? And I'm talking about with LGR and without LGR here, because, you know, our reserves, as you say, it is risky if we start eating into those.
It is, and there's a statement. So when you look at the budget report that goes to council next week, I have to produce a report. It's called a Section 25 report. It's the first annex to report, and the first thing that council are asked to do is note my report. The Section 25 report does two things. One, comments on the robustness of the budget estimates that we put in, so are they realistic? And two, on the adequacy of reserves. My conclusion at the moment is they are adequate, but that is predicated upon the condition that we deliver the actions that we've said we are going to do as a council to manage down those overspends that we've got at the moment. So we need to get TA numbers down. We're doing that through a couple of things: more preventative work, and also further expansion of our own direct provision of temporary accommodation, which helps us out from the reduction of the housing benefit subsidy gap that we have on private sector placements. The trajectories that we've got at the moment, the numbers are going down. They're just above 200 at the moment. A year or so ago, there were about 319 households in temporary accommodation. So we're moving in the right way, but there's always risk to macroeconomic events. Trump could decide to invade a country somewhere. That could effectively affect oil prices or domestic, and we could have another shock, the same as we saw with, Trump could decide to invade. He's not invaded any countries, correction there. He can make threats to invade other countries, yeah. In terms of the other major risk is around cleansing services and our reliance on the use of expensive agency arrangements, because we've reported previously sickness rates are in the region of 25 days on average. So you're paying twice. You're paying for the employee that's off sick, and you're also paying for agency cover. We need to get that down. We've got plans in place. Assuming those plans are delivered, our reserves are adequate. The risks there are therefore that if they're not, we're in a situation where I might be writing a very, very different Section 25 report this time next year. We've also said that we will be doing a budget reset report in September, where I'll be bringing that forward to Cabinet, and that we'll be able to make a very good and assessment at that point in time as to whether those actions have been successful or not. But the point you make earlier around LGR and planning for it, yes, we've put some scenarios in there of what it means, and we know that effectively if we do nothing and LGR doesn't happen, we will run out of cash. But if we were to start executing saving plans now to mitigate that, my assessment is that would be counterproductive, because we would, even if we think LGR may not happen, the recruitment market is planning that it isn't. So, for example, Simon is my Deputy 151 officer. He was previously an interim. I'm delighted he's with us permanently now, because it's such a difficult market to recruit to. I know they're trying to recruit a Section 151 officer at Dartford, a deputy at Medway. You just cannot get hold of those staff. And if you do the day rates, for a Section 15 officer, you're looking in north of £1,000 a day. 1,000 to 1,500 would be the going rate. So if we start hacking away at services and staff get flighty, I'm pretty sure we'd be overspending and then be putting in really restrictive controls in place on services, let alone spending. So I think steady as she goes is the right way to go. We'll have a better idea when we get to the summer. There's the announcement made on what the geography will be that we're working with, and we'll also know what it's looking like in terms of the first half of the year's spend.
Is there any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Scobie.
Thank you. You said we have a 3-year financial settlement now. Does that mean we actually know what we're going to get for the next 3 years, or will it be as varying as it's been this year?
Well, they've given us numbers, so that's a start. So we know in theory what they've gained, but as you said, a week is a long time in politics, and as is 3 years, and there could be a change to the composition of the cabinet. There could be a new Secretary of State for local government. There could be a new Chancellor of the Exchequer, and all of that can throw things up in the air. There could be macroeconomic events, I said. So we've got numbers that we can plan with, and that's helpful. I do not want to diminish that, because I've been banging the drum for years around one-year settlements are not helpful, particularly when you get them a couple of weeks before you're supposed to be setting your budget. So this is really good to have that. They're challenging numbers, but it's better to have challenging numbers than no numbers at all. But yeah, there's always the risk that they could change. There'll still be some form of consultation on it, and there'll be district councils, district council network, they'll be lobbying to say, it doesn't look like you've given us a good deal here, particularly if there looks like there's going to be a delay to LGR. My personal view is districts have got a bad deal because the government are figuring out, you've only got a year so to go after this, you've got big reserves, just use them up and carry that through, rather than the risks that they'll be aware of, that some district councils that are very flush with cash will be looking to use those up prior to LGR on local political priorities.
Thank you. My next question is around, it seems to take forever to get to the end of last year's budget. So we had to have it done by the 27th of February this year. Yeah. Next year it's the 31st of January. The following year it's November. Are we going to be able to hit these new targets?
Well, it's a team effort for me and Grant Thornton, so I can't say solely. I mean, and Simon and his team will be working their absolute hardest to get our draft accounts ready and out in time for June, isn't it, for this year? Yep. End of June, yep. To get them out. But Darren, I appreciate there's still capacity issues in the audit market. You might want to talk around the reality of those deadlines that we've been set.
Thank you, Chris. So as a firm, we are targeting for 25-26 audit to finish our field work by the end of November. So that's a year ahead of when the statutory deadline is, the end of November. So we're treating it as a dry run. We will sit down with Chris and Simon, set out some of the stumbling blocks that we think might exist that would cause a problem to achieving that deadline, and together seek to work through that. But I can assure you, we are staffed to be able to deliver to that deadline.
Does anyone else have any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Munns.
If I may, just on the ICT findings, did you say it was privileged access controls or physical access controls was the issue?
So the workaround system, there were two pieces of work. So one piece of work was basically checking when the system migration happened, all the data was transferred over to the new system correctly, where we did not identify any issues. The other piece of work related around what kind of controls exist around the general ledger system, what kind of people have access, what kind of access they have, which departments they relate to. In that process, we identified there were some people in the finance team who have a privileged user access. Having a privileged user access means that you have the ability to make changes to a user's access system, ability to create users, delete users, which creates kind of opens up a risk and also sort of does not follow the segregation of duty rules around IT systems. Having said that, we did test substantially those users who have privileged user access. We did not identify significant issues around management override of controls, which is a positive. However, those issues have been reported to Chris and Simon and the rest of the finance team, and they have provided us responses, and they have a way forward that those access should then get revoked next year, or an alternative solution is provided.
Of course, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say I support all the findings of the work that AJ's done there. I'm not challenging that at all, and there's work that needs to be done. I think it's fair to say, we've been with eFinancials for 20 years, so moving across was a big change, and there are always going to be some teething issues when you move across to a new system like that. There's some commentary in the management response saying that we'll be looking into the feasibility of workflowing. I'm pretty confident it is feasible. Technology One can do that. It's more of a question of have we got the internal capacity to implement that, but that's much higher in my list of priorities than perhaps the management response sort of indicated. That's something that needs to be in there in a modern finance system. So yeah, I'm fully supportive of the recommendations and we'll be taking those forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Packman.
Everything we've spoken about tonight around reserves, around LGR, and kind of the report itself, how confident are you as officers that we're okay? And how have we got to this position? I know there's a long history here, but could we have done anything short term to avoid this? Because I think it's always best to learn just in case LGR doesn't happen in 2-3 years' time. But from an officer's perspective, you know, can you reassure us that actually we're okay if LGR happens? And how confident are you that we can do something if LGR doesn't happen? If that makes sense.
Again, I'll sort of refer back. So I've put it in writing in the Section 25 report that you'll be considering at Council next week. But for this committee, I mean, we've got on the agenda later tonight around risk. So there's always risk involved, and we need to have processes in place to manage that. So if you look at where our reserves have reduced significantly over these 2 financial years, and there are a few prime drivers around that I've spoken about and how we're addressing those. But if you look at over the 2-year period that our reserves have pretty much fallen by about 10 million, 9 million, 10 million pounds, or our forecast to. But I would expect, given we're now in the end of February and the numbers I've seen, the outturn forecast is going to come in there or thereabouts. The primary driver for that is homelessness and housing benefit, which those 2 things are linked together. Sort of 60% of the loss of reserves comes from that. And we've been actively trying to do things to reduce that. The TA programme, we've got £41 million in the capital programme over 2 years, but you can't buy that many houses overnight and get households placed there. So it takes time. There's a long sort of implementation time for those issues. But we're not alone. I'm sure Darren will be reporting similar sort of issues at other authorities. Homelessness in particular is massive. It's such a significant issue. You're seeing London councils and upper tier councils. It's a bigger financial problem for them than even social care. So then to put that through into a district council, it's quite. We've got the highest numbers in homelessness, along with Swale, are comparators in the whole of Kent. When you look at the authority, potentially Medway might be slightly larger, but they've got a larger area they're covering. But for a district council, we do. But they're spending London Council something like £4 million a day on temporary accommodation collectively, and the £300 million overspend last year on it. So it's a systemic national issue that's affecting lots of other councils, and we're doing our best to address it. The fair funding review has been undertaken to try and look at needs and expenses versus resources, and that has benefited us to a degree. Next year, some of our funding has gone up, but it's due to drop in the later years. So government has assessed that as fair, and they've undertaken that review, but our funding will drop in 27 and onwards. So, as I said, we can contain that for 24 months, but if it's extended beyond that, we will need to take action. That's not an option. We will have to take some action. I can't say now what that action looks like, but there will need to be, whether it's through work with MHCLG and capitalisation directors and some flexibility in using capital resources to support the revenue position, or it's a savings programme, we will need to do something because our funding is going to go down. So, yeah.
And just to say that my thinking about this is that we're not going into it blind. We know exactly what position we're in, so we're not going to be caught out. It feels that, yes, we're keeping the lights on and we have to run a very tight ship for that. But strategically, it makes absolute sense not to be bolstering our reserves artificially at the expense of services. We have to provide these services, and that's our responsibility. But we're aware of what could happen in a couple of years, and so we're going into it, I think, strategically with our eyes open. So that should be some comfort, at least, I think. Does anyone else have anything further on this? No? Okay. So the recommendation is that the committee considers and notes the audit findings report from the 2024-25 Statement of Accounts, Annex 1, and that in the unlikely event that a minor change would be required, which might be considered immaterial, the Section 151 be delegated to the authority to sign off the accounts in consultation with the chair. And further, that number 3 is that the committee considers and notes the external auditor's annual report covering value for money for the year 2024 to 2025, as set out in the Annex 2. So may I please have a proposer for that? Thank you, Councillor Britcher. And may I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Scobie. Do we all agree? Thank you. So we're moving on to agenda item 5. This is the external audit letter of representation 24-25. That's pages 151 to 160 on your pack. Chris, could you introduce the report?
So this next item is called the letter of representation. Basically, this is management's formal way of looking the auditors in the eye and saying, we've given you everything we have and we've not hidden anything in the closet. There's no hidden skeletons. This is we've given you all the information that we've got, and that's our declaration effectively to them. So the letter rep, it specifically notes the backstop issue we've just been talking about, and by signing this we're confirming that to the best of our knowledge the estimates for things like our pension fund and asset valuations are as accurate as they can be given the circumstances. So once the committee's discussed this, Chair, you and I will need to sign this document in order to keep the audit process moving forward.
And do councillors have any comments on that? No? And I just have a comment on the backstop issue. Am I right in thinking that the issue is more apparent than real? Does that make sense? That's...
I'll probably put that to the auditors because they're the experts in the room on that. But yes, but the auditors can only audit what they're given, and they weren't, because of the backstop issues, they weren't able to audit the opening balances, so they can't say us. It's a bit like a relay race. So the last person's fumbled the baton. And so they don't know where the starting line is, but they know what we've done so far. So they might be able to measure our time, but they don't really know where we've started. I don't know if that analogy is any good, Darren.
Thank you. I would say it is real. And I think the state that the whole local government sector got into with timely financial reporting, the ability for annual audits to be completed on time, it just felt as if it had fallen off a cliff. And the impact of the recovery from that is quite deep. And us as a firm and other firms and the National Audit Office have all spoken of a recovery period of 3 to 5 years. And just to be absolutely clear, we say it in the report, but currently we haven't issued the opinions for your last 2 years because of a specific issue, but they will be disclaimed. We're going to disclaim the 24-25 opinion. It's highly likely that 25-26 will be disclaimed, but there's that opportunity to move along an improvement journey so that in future years, we're not just issuing disclaimer of opinions, and I hope we can get there before local government reorganisation takes effect.
Yeah, Chair, if I could just comment on that. I mean, that is a crucial target, isn't it, Darren, in terms of the reorganisation, because you'll have all these authorities throwing their finances together. So to have some assurance that those balances and figures are actually correct from the auditors will make it a lot easier. I don't know how the new Section 151 officer will be able to write their Section 25 report when they're setting their draft budget without that. So, yeah, it's a huge and really important undertaking.
But we're not alone in that, because literally every local authority is in exactly the same boat.
There are a few, aren't they, Darren? I think that we're in better positions previously, and you were able to give full opinions on that. But the vast majority, I believe, are still in a similar situation as Thanet.
Yes, I mean there's a cohort where clean, unqualified audit opinions are still being issued, And believe you me, those that we're responsible for, we're moving heaven and earth to ensure that they don't slip into a backstop position. But the number of authorities that are in a backstop position is far too high.
Thank you. So the recommendation is for noting that the Governance and Audit Committee note the letter of representation to Grant Thornton by the Director of Corporate Resources and Section 151 officer. So do all councillors agree to note the report and the letter of representation? Thank you. So the next agenda item 6 is the quarterly risk management report, and that's pages 3 to 22 of the supplementary agenda pack. So Amy, would you mind introducing the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening, all. Tonight I would like to present the Corporate Risk Report. As I'm sure you all know, our authority monitors and manages its corporate risks through the Corporate Risks and Service Risk Registers. The contents of this report highlight the high priority corporate risks and show the arrangements that are put in place to ensure these risks are monitored and managed appropriately. This report does represent the position around about the middle of January, and as such is a snapshot of where we sat at that time and the mitigation sat. So please bear in mind that some of these risks may well have moved on since that point. Just as a quick update before the report findings, as you are aware, we are in the process of refreshing the risk management strategy. This is progressing really well. After meeting with the subgroup, members of the Governance and Audit Committee in September last year, there was discussion around the proposed new matrix, the risk appetite statement and the 5x5 matrix and scoring mechanisms. This has been explored further, and after feedback from members and officers has been agreed, and the format of the look and the new matrix has been embedded in the new risk management strategy. We have also just completed some training with the Governance and Audit Subcommittee on the new risk appetite statement and the risk gap. More of this to follow in next time's Governance and Audit. The new risk gap has been given a test run as well by the digital team. That has been instrumental in developing this to a place where it will be fit for purpose and will streamline the risk cycle that we have at the moment. Also, the councillors on the subgroup have requested a sandbox version, which we have just been able to give to them prior to this meeting. So good news all round on that, and more to follow in next Governance and Audit. So on to the Corporate Risk Register, but just before I do, I would invite members of this committee to note that individual service risks such as the port, which are not currently included in the Corporate Risk Report, will be reviewed as part of the strategy refresh, which will be in place from Q1. The implementation of a new scoring mechanism and appetite statements will allow these risks to be more clearly delineated and appropriately categorised, and as such will be presented, if applicable, on this report once the new strategy is in place. So yes, it is the supplementary agenda, and on the summary on page 8 you will note there has been quite some movement with the risks and also new risks and removed risks. At the last Governance and Audit Committee meeting, we detailed that limited resource and homelessness was merged into a new risk category of financial instability from unsustainable service demands. Members did feel that this consolidated approach did not go far enough, and as such we have now delineated the risks back to limited resource financial sustainability, which is still scored at a 16, and homelessness, again, still scored at a 16, but we have kept financial instability risk, which remains at a 16, and of course I'm sure we'll be able to answer any questions on that afterwards. Members will also note that we have now removed Environmental Act 2021 and Manston Airport risks, as these have been successfully mitigated to a level that sits below the corporate report. As members will also see, there are 2 new risks added to the report on this cycle. The first one, which I think Chris has actually touched on earlier in the meeting, is on page 13. This is the agency spending in cleansing services. So we actually have this as a financial and service delivery risk of an impact of 3, which is significant, and a likelihood which is 4, which is very likely, giving overall risk score of 12. And I'm sure you've read it, but as an overview, the operational volatility in cleansing services is a major driver of the structural deficit. High levels of staff sickness, currently forecasting a £750,000 overspend for 25-26, necessitate a heavy and expensive reliance on the agency staff to meet statutory collection duties. As you will see from the report, my colleagues have set out a variety of mitigations in the report, from recruiting to all vacant posts to reducing agency agency usage, appointing a HR advisor with remit on resolving long-term absence, and also ring-fencing a sickness contingency, which I understand as well is only released if the service demonstrates that all corrective management measures have been executed. And the second new risk to the report is on page 19 of the supplementary agenda, and that is for the waking watch. This has a financial impact of 4, which is severe, and a likelihood of 3, which is probable, again, an overall score of 12. So this has actually been identified that the risk of financial impact of the waking watch has been extended. This is due to the BSR sign-offs being delayed for the remedial works on 4 of our tower blocks. The impact is that the HRA balance, which should sit at a minimum of £1 million surplus, could go into deficit should we need to extend the waking watch for a significant period of time. At the moment, the mitigations that I've been given are that this is to ensure stringent communications with BSR, providing all information in a timely manner in order to prevent further delays and mitigating the financial impact of this risk. All other risks on this report have been updated, but remain at the same scoring levels. So that concludes my overview of the quarterly risk report update. Thank you, and I'm sure myself and my colleagues would be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Lovely, thank you so much. Do we have any questions from that report? It's a good report. Go ahead, Councillor Richer.
Well, it's not so much a question, but first of all, thank you for the session we had beforehand, because I think it was good to see the future plans for how these corporate risks are going. But yeah, it'll be a 5x5 grid from now on. And also reassuring to see the large number of mitigating actions for each of these risk areas. Yeah, in particular, the new one about the cleansing staff. It was yeah, very reassuring to see nearly a full page of mitigating actions we're taking. So thank you to you and your team.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No, just to echo that, we really appreciate all the work that you've done, and I know that one of our colleagues who's not here today is very happy about the 5x5 increased sensitivity. So may I have, so the recommendation is that the G&A Committee is being asked to approve the Corporate Risk Management Quarterly Report and note the progress update. Could I please have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Packman and Councillor Britcher as a seconder. Do we all agree? Agree. Thank you. So next it's agenda item 7. This is a quarterly internal audit report. This is pages 161 to 82 or 182 of the main pack. Simon Webb, could you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is our regular quarterly internal audit update report summarising the work undertaken on your behalf by the East Kent Audit Partnership since the date of the last meeting of this committee, together with the performance of the East Kent Audit Partnership to the 31st of December. If I could draw your attention to page 165 of the agenda pack, that summarises the 5 new audits completed during this period. A very positive quarter for Thanet District Council. We are continuing to see a very positive direction of travel in terms of the assurance levels arising from the audits that we undertake. During this period, we concluded substantial assurance in one area, which was right to buy, and reasonable assurance in 4 areas. Of particular note, project management, given perhaps some previous concerns about things like Berth 4-5 project. The new project management arrangements appear very robust, and reasonable assurance is the highest assurance level that we have concluded in that area here at Thanet. So that is very pleasing to see. Also concluded reasonable assurance in the areas of car parking and enforcement, and also ICT physical and environmental controls. You will see that cybersecurity is the number 1 risk facing you. It's probably the number 1 risk facing the vast majority of organisations. And we will also touch on that later in this agenda pack when we talk about next year's internal audit plan. ICT physical and environmental controls contribute quite significantly to providing a stable ICT environment and guarding against cyber attack. So that's very pleasing to see that assurance level. We did conclude limited assurance in one area, and that was refuse collection. The reasons for that limited assurance are detailed within the bullet points on pages 170 to 171. We do have a comprehensive written management response from Mr. Elmer, the Head of Cleaning Services, and that's on pages 171 of the agenda pack. We will probably be bringing the follow-up, looking at the implementation dates for the recommendations. I think we should be able to bring the follow-up to the April meeting of this committee and hopefully a revised assurance level. As I've mentioned previously, follow-up is an important part of internal audit work. Every 3 to 6 months we go back and undertake a follow-up of the audits that we have undertaken to check that the agreed management actions have been implemented. We completed two during the period under review, and they're detailed on page 172 of the agenda pack. Procurement was substantial both before and after follow-up. The other follow-up was allotments, and we're pleased to report there that it's moved from limited to reasonable assurance. In terms of the annexes to the report, probably the most important one is progress against the plan, and that's to the 31st of December, and that's detailed on page 175 through to 177. As at 31st of December, we were a bit behind with the plan as we were carrying a staff vacancy. We'd completed 61% of the plan at 31st of December against the target of 75. I can update that at the end of January that was up to 67%. We are now, however, fully staffed, and there is an awful lot of audits underway at Thanet over the next 6 weeks, taking us up to the 31st of March. So fingers crossed we will have a very respectable percentage plan completion by 31st of March. That's it from me, Chair. Happy to take any questions on any items within the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And do councillors have any comments that they wish to make? No? Excellent, thank you so much. So the recommendation is that the committee notes the report and that any changes to the agreed 2025 to 2026 internal audit plans resulting from changes in perceived risks that were detailed at point 5 of the Annex 1 in the attached report be approved. So please could I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Bridger, and Councillor Donaldson as a seconder. Do all councillors agree? Thank you. So next we're on to agenda item 8, which is the quarterly Treasury Management Report. Chris, could you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. So, councillors, this report, the purpose of it is to update the committee on our sort of debt and investment position at this point of the financial year. The key highlights to bring to your attention include, in terms of borrowing, our gross debt stood at 63.6 million as of the 31st of December, and this included a new £10 million loan that we took out specifically for the housing revenue account in relation to capital expenditure on housing acquisition and other works. In terms of our investments, our investment balance was 29.8 million, which is managed with a strict priority on security and liquidity over yield, which is a standard approach for most local authorities, but even more so given our low reserve position, we would be prioritising security over any other of the criteria that you assess investments against. And from a compliance perspective, I can confirm the council's operated within all its approved prudential and treasury indicators, including our authorised borrowing limits. So this report is for oversight and information. I'm happy to take any technical questions that members may have.
Are there any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Packman.
Yeah, just on borrowing, do we expect a surge of borrowing in Q4 or into the next financial year, and what risks does that create for us?
I'm not expecting in Q4, I mean, we're almost at the end of it, so I'm not expecting a surge, certainly not in Q4 of borrowing. I expect more borrowing next financial year, particularly given the size of our capital programme, both in the HRA and the general fund, which is still, the borrowing is usually related to housing in the general fund for temporary accommodation. The risks are mainly that interest rates would increase above the assumptions that we've got, which would put pressure on the revenue budget. But I would say there's more downward risk than upside risk in terms of the movement on interest rates. We just had the most recent inflation figures coming through and they've dropped to 3%. There's speculation at the moment, so the Bank of England meets in March again. Whether they'll reduce rates in March or April, I'd expect another quarter point reduction in rates at that point in time at one of those two meetings. So yeah, there's always some risk because economies can go sideways and that can put pressure, but minimal. And the loans from a borrowing perspective we take out tend to be government sort of issued loans. We use the Public Works Loan Board, PWLB, to take our debts on. So there's not a counterparty risk. It's not as if we're investing with sort of troubled or uncertain third parties.
Sorry, what was that? Perfect. So any other comments? Okay, this one's for noting. So the recommendation is that the Governance Audit Committee notes the report and makes any comments as appropriate. Do we all agree to note the report? Thank you. So next it's agenda item 9. This is our draft internal audit plan for 26-27. This is pages 195 to 224 of the main pack. Christine Parker, could you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. The report before you sets out how the internal audit service is to be delivered and also presents the draft 26-27 plan of work for your consideration. If I take you to page 196, paragraph 2, in terms of the how, the last time the Audit Committee received the audit charter was 3 years ago. We then agreed that we would only bring it back to governance and audit if there were significant changes to the charter. I thought it was really useful to also compare the requirements of the new global internal audit standards, having moved away from the public sector internal audit standards. Rather usefully, we've made any changes in red text to highlight those changes, so members can see there aren't a significant number of changes throughout the whole document, but it's really important for members of the committee to understand the document exists, what it's trying to do, and to reassure you. So we used to bring it annually with the plan and realised that was not required. We have also said in the recommendation that we're asking the committee to re-endorse the charter for the next 3 years, but of course that takes us past a date that we've just been noting with the local government review. So again, the commitment will be, if there are significant changes, then clearly we would bring back a new charter and mandate. But assuming business as usual, this is how the internal audit service would be planned to be delivered for the next couple of years. Moving through then, the annex to that, pages 201 to 220, sets out in full the charter. A question that we had when we presented this elsewhere, just to preempt that one, it is one charter for East Kent Audit Partnership for all 4 councils. We don't have a different charter at each of the councils. We provide the same service to each of the 4 councils, so there's no need to sort of adapt it and present a different one at each site. So, moving forward through the report, if you like, the second half of the report, from page 197, we talk about the various steps that we have gone through in order to derive the plan that we are presenting to you this evening. And of course, it's very much about a risk-based approach. We don't have the resources to audit everything every year, and we obviously profile, if you like, the whole universe of possible areas that we could audit. We look at what we've learned from when we've audited it before, what's happening within the industry, within public sector across the nation and across our colleagues in Kent from learning through Kent Audit Group. Also, obviously, looking at the corporate risk register and everything we've been talking about risk within the service plans and what your opportunities are. But also to take that global look. So annually, the profession produces the Risk in Focus report, and that's all sectors and it's global. So we take the top 5 of those risks, and surprise, surprise, well, you're not surprised to know that cyber is still the top one in that regard. We then overlay that to what we're planning to do here and have made a comment with whether we've made provision within the plan to accommodate those top 5 risks or what our response to that is as well. Moving through the report, it's my duty as your head of internal audit to try and help members understand the context. Whilst we have very prescribed professional standards, nobody actually tells you what is enough audit. So when we get to June 26-27 and we ask you, do you feel you've had enough assurance to sign off your annual governance statement? What is enough? What is sufficient? So it's a very difficult task. So what we try to do is give you some context. So paragraph 4 does give you some benchmarking there to give you a number of days comparison. But that leads to the conclusion in paragraph 5, where I'm saying I do believe that with the number of days you have available, we will be in a position to provide enough assurance for you to sign that annual governance statement off. Of course, internal audit is only one of your sources of assurance. It's a key source of assurance because of the areas that we cover, but it's only one of those. And it's the Section 151's responsibility, after all. It's his plan. So the plan itself then is attached as pages 221 to 223. We have tried to show again, an indicative 4 years, so you can see that we can't cover everything in 1 year, but there's a likelihood of what we could cover in 4 years. We've also shown those audits on at the foot of the table there that are falling outside of that cycle. We've tried to show you the assurance at the last time it was audited and whether that's been followed up or is due to be followed up. That would be the opinion there. And also at the very foot of the table, you'll see the Partnership 1 audit plan, which is our customer services, business rates, housing benefits provision. So that said, members, it's really for you to approve both and adopt, for us to adopt the audit charter and to adopt the plan of work. We're only asking you to agree the next 12 months, not the full 4 years, obviously. It's just the next 12 months' work. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to put on record my thanks to Simon and Christine for pulling the audit plan together under a shorter time frame. Usually we'd be bringing this to committee in March, but because of the backstop date, we pulled the meeting forward. And that's meant that Simon has, in particular, I know, has undertaken a quite considerable amount of work to get it pulled together in time for this committee. So my thanks.
And I just have a comment. So with regard to the planning for the next 3 years, it feels like, you know, as Councillor Plattman said, we should still be thinking as though LGR isn't happening, which is why it's very sensible, I think, and very useful for us to have it laid out over the next few years, because otherwise there is a risk if we were just trying to make it up until the point when we thought LGR might happen. At that point, there might be things slipping through the net. So I think it's very sensible and strategically very wise to do as you've done, to actually make sure that we have a plan in process for our audit universe, notwithstanding what might happen. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I did forget to say we haven't put a contingency in for LGR. We've had the conversation, should we provide time, will internal audit be asked to put things down to do other work? And we did decide that we won't put a contingency in, but we might come back to the committee and say we're going to divert things and change the plan as the year unfolds. At the point, as you say, we've done it a month early, so at this point in time we don't know enough to make a provision. So we said we'll produce a plan that looks like business as usual. So thank you, and I apologise for not covering that point.
So the recommendation is that members approve to adopt the internal audit charter. You'd have to have a really good reason not to. Mandate for delivery of the internal audit service for the next. It's written here for the next 3 years, but we've just already discussed that we're looking at least for the first 12 months initially, and that the draft of the 2026 to 27 internal audit plan be approved. Could I please have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Scobie, and Councillor Brichter as a seconder. Do all councillors agree? Thank you. So our next agenda item is Statement of Accounts 2024 to 25. That's pages 225 to 368 of our agenda pack. Is it yourself, Chris?
It is. I mean, I'll be introducing them, but I can't take the credit for producing them, which actually sits with Simon here. He's done all the hard work to pull it together, but it is my name that goes against them to say that they represent a true and fair view of the council's finances. But yeah, again, I offer my thanks to Simon and his team for all the work they've done on this. So these accounts provide the formal and statutory record of the council's financial position. As previously discussed under the audit findings report, these accounts include the relevant disclosures regarding the disclaimed audit position due to the national backstop, and we've spoken already about the drawdown from reserves, which was necessary due to our significant overspend. So, Chair, the committee is asked to approve the statement of accounts tonight, and I'll also be requesting that delegated authority be granted to me in consultation with you to make any final immaterial, so small or narrative adjustments if required before the actual final audit is signed off by the auditors, final account, sorry, is signed off by the auditors.
Lovely. So that's a recommendation, as Chris has said. May I please have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Packman, and may I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Britcher. And we all agree? Lovely, thank you. So that concludes tonight's proceedings for the Governance and Audits Committee. Thank you so much.